Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dr. Anthony Chow, the Director of the School of Information. I just want to say I'm so honored and humbled to have Romelia and all of our distinguished panelists with us today. My apologies, but I'm currently at the Board of Director meeting for the Little Free Library in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I'm going to step off after this introduction. Today's symposium is one small way in which libraries and the San Jose State iSchool are trying to address equity, diversity, and inclusion in our society and field today. We are proud to sponsor a series of Heritage Month symposiums such as this, and today's proceedings will be recorded, transcribed, and be added to our Hispanic Latino Heritage Web Resource Center and our EDI YouTube channel shortly after today. Today, we celebrate Hispanic Latino Heritage Month, and our theme is Unifying the Information Community. Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to the real brains and brawn of this event, Dr. José Aguiñaga. Have a wonderful symposium and day. José?
Thank you, Dr. Chow, and welcome everyone. New faculty with the iSchool, and let's begin with our keynote presenter for today. Let me introduce you to Dr. Romelia Salinas, Dean of the Library and Learning Resources at Mount San Antonio College in Walnut, California. Dr. Salinas has her MLIS and PhD in Library and Information Science from UCLA. Dr. Salinas, welcome.
Thank you, Jose. So happy to be here. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. I do have a few slides I'd like to share with the group. And so you can just bear with me while I bring that up and then adjust all my other screens so we can have a good time together. Okay. So can someone confirm they can see my PowerPoint?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I'm just, give me a minute. I want to make sure I can see everyone's chat. I don't want that. Okay. All right. Welcome today. Thank you for sharing this space with me. I am Dr. Romelia Salinas, and I am the Dean of Library and Learning Resources at Mount San Antonio College, and I'm also the Reforma National President. And Reforma is a national association to promote library services to Latinos and the Spanish speaking. I first of all like to thank the San Jose State iSchool for inviting me today. I think it's a true honor to be speaking here today at this symposium, which allows me to bring together two of my loves. One being librarianship, the other one being the celebration of my LatinX heritage. I think it's just a wonderful opportunity, so I'm glad to be here. This year, the theme for the Hispanic Heritage Month is Unidos, Inclusivity for a Stronger Nation. Considering the theme today, the symposium is entitled Unifying the Information Profession. And or the information community, sorry. And I would add to build a stronger nation. The work of libraries and information professionals and organizations provide to our country contributes to fostering not only an inclusive society, but very much a stronger nation. So I want to make sure that you remember that our work matters. So at times it's easy to forget, but our work does matter. So I kind of want to just start off with saying that. When I was invited to be the keynote, I was talking to Jose about it. I said, well, what do you want my presentation to include? Should it be an academic talk? Should it be a personal talk? And he's like, well, I don't want you to bore people. And I was like, okay. So I hope what I'm going to do today, you find appealing. I'm going to take more of a blended approach where I do want to share a little bit about myself and how I've gotten to be here today. But I also want to share a little bit about my research interests and the work I've done around certain topics and certain issues. Please feel to use the chat if you'd like to make comments throughout the presentation. There will be a Q&A time at the end. And I will also be asking you questions at some points throughout my presentation. So I'd appreciate your participation, but your participation, you can drop it in the chat if you feel like it, that if you feel comfortable sharing. If you don't, I like for you just to, consider my questions and self-reflect as I go through this. So I've organized my talk around 3 main points. First is my journey, who I am and how I got here professionally. The second topic are my passions, issues that give work meaning to me. Why do I come to work every day? And then finally, my lessons learned, things I have learned after working over 30 years in libraries. So that's kind of the way I'm structuring our talk. So let's go ahead and move on to our first topic, or my first topic, which is my journey. And I have to tell you, I generally feel a little uncomfortable talking about myself. So this is kind of a challenge for me, how much to share, what do I feel comfortable sharing. But my journey is my inspiration. So as I reflect back on who I am and how I got here to this point in my life, I see that my journey is my inspiration. Oftentimes, especially for BIPOCs, we keep our personal life away from our professional life, right? Librarianship continues to be predominantly a white profession. I think we're still at about 80% white. Maybe my numbers are off, but I believe that was the last number I'm familiar with. But so in an effort to fit in, sometimes we may hesitate to bring in our personal experiences to our work. But your difference is what makes you an asset to the profession. So keep that in mind as well. So I encourage you, so as I share my story, I challenge you to think about your story and what in your story, what in your journey inspires you. So first, I grew up in Central California in a very small rural farm working community. My parents were immigrants, and they worked as farm workers their entire life. I am the eldest in the family, so when I entered public school, English was not my first language. I was an English learner. Both my parents had very few years of education, but they valued education highly. So they always instilled that value of studying hard and doing well in school. Until I went away to college, all my jobs were in the farm working industry. I worked in the fields, I worked in canneries, I worked in packing houses. And I learned what hard work was all about. And I have to say that history, that experience has given me perspective over the years. When I start to feel that I can't do something, that something's too hard for me, I find strength in thinking of that earlier work that I did. So think about those hard points in your life where how you can find strength and how they can inform your future work or the work that you're doing now. I was the first in my family to go to college, so I was first generation. So right after high school, I went to UC Santa Barbara. So imagine the culture shock I experienced coming from a small community, a very poor small community in Central California to UCSB. It was very difficult. Back then, there wasn't as many retention programs. There was no discussion of what it meant to be a first generation college student. And so as a first generation student, just like students nowadays are still experiencing, I experienced those issues around belonging, financial issues, balancing the work and life expectations or needs that I needed to have. But what happened there is I took my first Chicano studies class. And it was my first time reading literature that reflected my culture and my experiences. And it was amazing. And I'm sure many of you here probably had that same experience. And it was through Chicano studies that I was led to library science. I took a class as an undergrad that was taught by the Chicano studies librarian, Sal Gureña. I don't know if some of you might know him. He worked as the director of the California Ethnic and Multicultural Archives at UC Santa Barbara for many years. And in that class, it was a research methods class in Chicano studies. And in that class, he talked about librarianship as a profession. And it really spoke to me. I enjoyed the class and it spoke to me. So I approached him and I asked him, I'm thinking that maybe I want to be a librarian. How do you do it? I mean, I had no idea what it meant to be a librarian. And he gave me a job, a student worker job, and that in the archives. And that was my first introduction to the information profession. And he kind of mentored me through the whole application process. And eventually I went on to go to UCLA to get my MLIS. Also what happened at that time, as I was working with Sal at UCSB, Reforma had his national archives in his institution. So that was when I first started to learn about Reforma. And when I applied to graduate school, I applied for a Reforma scholarship, and I was a Reforma scholarship recipient. And at that time at UCLA, there was a mentoring program. It was a UCLA LIS and Reforma mentoring program. So every Latino student that would come into the library science program would get a Reformista assigned to them as their mentor. And so I had the great privilege of having Mr. Richard Chabran assigned to me as my mentor, who at that time was the Chicano Studies librarian at UCLA. So I had a marvelous time working with Richard. He really was an absolute fabulous mentor. At that time, the internet was just becoming a thing. And so he was very innovative, and he was just starting off a project called the Chicano Latino Network. And it was the first Chicano Studies website that was going to be coming up onto the internet. It actually started as a Gopher site. So before there was the web interface, there was the way you access the internet was through a text-based, sorry, I'm getting, it was through Gopher first, it moved over to web. Anyway, I worked with Richard, and eventually I stayed, my first academic job as librarian was at the Chicano Studies Library at UCLA, and I continued to work with him. And so just like the establishment of Chicano Studies and other ethnic studies libraries in the 1970s, their goal was to create representation of this literature within the academia, right? So what I was doing with Richard is we were trying to ensure representation of content about the Latino community in the online environment. So this was something that we were doing in the early 1990s, 92, 93. And we were doing this through various ways. We were creating listservs. And nowadays it might sound like, oh, that doesn't sound like a big deal. But at that time, it was a big deal. You know, the internet was not something everybody had access to. And as we know, not everyone does. And I'll speak to that in a bit. But we were hosting listservs to try to generate online content about Latino topics. We were creating web pages. We were working with Latino organizations to train them on what is the internet, why it's important for your organization to get online, how do you use email. Eventually, both Richard and I went over to UCR and we extended some of that work. We were working on different initiatives having to do with developing information literacy in local communities. So we established the Community Digital Initiative. We built a community lab in the east side of Riverside. So it was a UCR project, but it was actually in a community center. And so we had to bring in, you know, power and network and so on. Anyway, very interesting work that I did with Richard. Eventually, I went over to work at Cal State LA, which is where I spent the bulk of my professional life. And there, you know, I continued to try to work on building relevant collections and services and so on. And in 2016, I accepted a position at Mount San Antonio College as Associate Dean. Later, a few years later, I was promoted to Dean. And I continued to try to move some of these ideas that I had as a librarian, because, you know, as an administrator, you do have a little bit of greater control. Not a lot. I think sometimes people think like, you're in charge, well, why didn't you do this? It's not as easy as it sounds. But the other thing that happened though, when I became an administrator, there was an additional expectation of leadership service to the profession. And so with that, I did become involved, and I was involved as librarian. I've always been involved with Reforma. That has been my constant. I served on the national level. I was chapter president in the LA area for many years. But once becoming an administrator, I really felt like my professional career took off, and I was doing a lot more on the national level, getting invited to different talks, different organizations and so on. So I feel like I've grown a lot. But at this point in my life, I think I'm the most proudest of being elected Reforma National President. As you can see from my journey, Reforma has always been there for me. It is my family. It is my professional family. It is where I have grown up in. So, I am happy to be able to serve in this capacity and give back to Reforma the way it has given me so much over the years. So I share all this personal history because I want to demonstrate how my journey informs my work. My journey, my struggles, my inspirations, whether it is to serve the undocumented, the poor, the rural communities, whatever it might be, it's all rooted back to my earlier experiences that have shaped who I am now. So at this point, I'd like to ask you to take a moment and think about your own journey, how your journey shapes how you provide or hope to provide services, how you approach your work, inform your thinking and your perspectives. Whether you'll be working with immigrant communities, non-English speaking communities, first generations, rural community patrons, whoever it might be, think about what is it in your journey that has fostered that inspiration to serve those communities. So topic number 2, my passions. I like this quote by Frida Kahlo. Passion is the bridge that takes you from pain to change. Those things that hurt me the most are those things that have changed me the most. I struggle with this topic about what exactly are my passions, because there have been many over the years. They have been about building relevant collections, about serving the excluded, about breaking barriers, and so on. But the one that I feel has stayed with me the longest is about the digital inclusion. And that's really what I want to speak to you about. About digital inclusion. But again, going back to what I just earlier said, what are your passions? If you think about my experience growing up in a rural community, till this day, my mother, her community where she lives, we don't have access to broadband. You could only access the internet through the satellite. There's a lot of communities that are still excluded from being able to use digital information or access digital information. So think about who you are again, your journey, and how that lends itself to what you're passionate about. In January of 2021, I was a counselor at large for the American Library Association. And at that time, the council passed a resolution in support of broadband as a human life. This is the resolve clause of that resolution. It reads, affirms universal access to affordable, high-capacity broadband is as essential as electricity, and therefore a basic right for all. This is a significant position to take at the national landscape for libraries. Even though libraries and ALA have been advocating and addressing equity issues around access to digital information, this statement refers to it as a basic right, which is significant. So what was happening in January of 2021? Where were we? Where was our society at that moment? Well, we were in the middle of a pandemic, right? We had been in a pandemic for a while. Most of us were still working remotely. Maybe our state was still in a state of emergency, whatever it might be. But that's what was happening. And what happened as a result of that is this idea or the spotlighting of that not everyone has access to broadband, not everyone has access to the internet, and it was creating major problems for certain communities. So like I said, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about digital inclusion. So I've been working with digital inclusion issues for some time. I think the pandemic was obviously a traumatic experience for everyone worldwide, but the closure of public spaces magnified the existence of digital inequities that certain communities experienced in the US. But what exactly do I mean when I say digital inclusion? What do you think that means? If we were to have a digital inclusive society, what would it look like? So at the root of this resolution, of the resolution that ALA passed, is the idea that we need to bridge the digital divide. So what is the digital divide? So I have here a definition from the Oxford English Dictionary, and the digital divide is defined as the gulf between those who have ready access to current digital technology, especially computers and internet, and those who don't. Also, a society or social or educational inequities resulting from this, right? So think about that definition. So it's not just about the technology, it's also about the inequities that result from not having access to the technology, right? So what I have on the other side of the screen is a chart. And so when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of attention being given to the lack of access to certain communities. And so there was a lot of efforts put into place to try to address that lack of access, right? And this is just a table of a study that was done early on, as soon as in October of 2020. So we've been remote for a few months, and it was done by the Educational Association, where they're trying to report, they were looking at all the states and trying to report how do students have access? What are the parameters, or what are the rates students have access to the internet and devices? So this is looking at both, at the internet and computers and so on. As you can see, this states, you have the Indigenous, Black, and Hispanic communities down at the bottom. Even though Asian Americans were or Asian Pacific Islanders were up on top, I have to say there's still subgroups within that community that are experiencing the digital divide. Unfortunately, this table doesn't show that, right? So we see that there was a huge gap, but there was gaps by race for students when they were trying to access or having access to broadband and devices. In September of 2020, there was another study done by, so kind of same time as the earlier study, by the Public Policy Institute of California. And let's take a deeper dive at looking at the impact of communities in California. This report found that 75% of all California households have access to broadband internet at home. When you look at low-income households, only 55% of them had broadband internet at home. 55%. So you think about students trying to get online to take their classes online, whether they're elementary school, community college, higher education. That's a lot of people that don't have the infrastructure at home to get online, right? So it was just a tremendous challenge, right, that we found ourselves in. The other point that I want to point out is that 26% of the lower income people who rely on their smartphones for going online. And if you have worked within higher education, we hear these stories often, especially in community colleges, where students are typing up their papers on their phone. They're taking tests on their phone. Imagine trying to do that. How is that equitable? Because maybe the phone is their only access to the internet. So people were actually taking their classes on their phone. The last piece of information I want to share with you, and this is actually from a different study that was done. This was from a study called, a report by the Partnership for LA Schools. And so early on, when the pandemic started, you had a lot of the internet companies try to offer free services to people, to try to address the gap. This report found that for certain communities, they were encountering major barriers for accessing the internet or taking advantage of these services that were being provided or offered by the internet companies. For example, many of them required credit cards, or certain neighborhoods were excluded. Social securities were required. So things like this made it hard for certain sectors of the communities to take advantage of these special offers that were being provided by the internet companies. Just wanted to share some of the headlines that were coming out at that time. And again, most of these focus on community college students because that's what I was looking at. So you have things like more than 100,000 low-income California college students lack internet access. So this is all coming out during the pandemic. Pandemic exposes digital divide among LA students. Despite improved access, digital divide persistence for minority low-income students. So about 6 months after we had been working remotely, UCLA put out the study, and they found that despite a lot of effort, the digital divide still was existing and persisting for minority low-income students. And this last one, I think, is the one that I find the most interesting. Families find throwing laptops and Wi-Fi at students isn't enough to bridge the digital divide. So think back of what my question was. What do you think digital inclusion is? Is it just about the technology? Obviously, this report here, or this article is saying, no, it's not enough, which kind of leads to my research. So sometime at some point, I went back to school, I got my PhD in library science. And one of the things that my dissertation research was on was undergraduates and the digital divide. And as part of that study, I carried out an extensive literature review, trying to learn all the various dimensions of the digital divide. What does it mean to be excluded? So, and I learned that barriers can be conceived both as internal and external. So remedying the barriers must be approached not only as an individual inadequacy. Sometimes we think about it, oh, they lack this, they lack that, but it's not just about what they lack. There's something else going on there. So it's not just it's not just the individual inadequacies. It's also about institutional and social deficiencies as well. So the literature review allowed me to identify and organize barriers to accessing digital information into 4 major categories, which provide the conceptual framework for my research, or for my model. So I wanted just to share my model with you. I won't take too much time. It's a lot, but okay. So the first type of barrier is connectivity. And this is usually what people talk about when they talk about the digital divide, the physical access to the technical mechanisms, whether it's laptops, hotspots, broadband. Essential, you can't get online without having these devices, right? But let's imagine everyone had a laptop, everyone had access to high broadband access, but is that enough? And I also would challenge you that when you talk about this, this is not just like a yes or no question. You have to look at other variables. So someone said, yes, I have access to the internet, but What kind of computer do they have? Is it old? Do they share it? Is it because they walk over to their cousin's house and that's where they access? So those kind of things have to be considered when you try to assess how much access does your community have, just in regards to the connectivity piece. The next barrier, so again, going back, so let's say everyone has access to computers and broadband. So the next type of barrier that relates to the literacies, the skills required and abilities to access, locate, use, evaluate the digital information, right? These type of barriers are also referred to in the literature as second level digital divide. So it's not enough just to have access to the technology. You also need to have the skills to use it. And so how do we do this? How do we do this within our work environments? The third type is the content. Students must have access, or people or patrons must have access to the content that meets their information needs. Examples of content barriers could be language barriers, it can be accessibility barriers, it could be costs associated with accessing the barriers. How many times have you tried to access something there's a cost associated with? There's a lot of things around the content. Does it exist? Does it exist for the users? And the last one, I kind of captured it. I call it psychosocial barriers. The psychological barriers are best captured in the studies having to do with psychological obstacles that undermine the acquiring of computer or information skills. You might be familiar with the library anxiety literature. It's kind of thinking around that. The social barriers are best explained in the literature related to the role of networks, social networks in play in successfully use of digital information. So I'm sure all of you can all think of that one person you call when you got a technology question, right? Or technology problem. Who do you go to? So not everyone has access to that kind of resource. So they don't have that social support to use the technology. And then when they do, when they encounter problems, do they just give up because they can't figure it out, right? So my intentions with this model was to be to provide a holistic construct of the digital divide, capturing both its internal and external aspects. And so when you think about the digital divide, think about all its layers. And so when you try to provide services to meet the needs of your community, I would like for you to think about all these other variables or challenges that they encounter. So a few weeks ago, I sent out an email to the Reforma listserv asking Reforma to share with me what they have been doing to try to address the digital divide for the Latinx communities. So I just wanted to share a few stories. I won't take too much time because I know I'm kind of towards the tail end. So first one is the Multnomah County Library in Oregon. And Alonso is the Digital Equity and Inclusion Coordinator. And he wrote, "My job is focused on getting folks access to computers, internet, and access classes. We provide these resources to all communities, including our Spanish-speaking communities. We have prioritized BIPOC communities through our outreach to connect them to our technology lending program and provide computer classes in the community directed by community's requests, interests, needs, and their availability. We have provided classes," and I think this is really interesting. "We have provided classes in parking lots, in parks, or community centers, in churches, and community organizations that share a space for us to provide classes, and many times they're offered in Spanish. Our technology lending program loans out Chromebooks and other hotspots for 6 months. And there's no fees for damages or stolen devices." And I know that fees, it deters certain communities from using the services. So you can have the fees, you can have the services, but if there's fees attached to it, sometimes the community members that they're intended to won't use them. And then they talk a little bit more about their partners. Let me go ahead and move on to the next example, which is the Denver Public Library. And from Denver Public Library, I heard from Nate, who is their program administrator for technology and education and access. And he wrote, "Our Plaza program, which works specifically with immigrant and refugees, has a dedicated fleet of Chromebooks and hotspots that they can check out to their participants. This gives them the ability to perform in-person, hands-off orientations to community, to technology, to community members, sometimes in their native language. They also led the way to translating the instructional materials that come with Chromebooks into multiple languages. In the digital inclusion department, we've been experimenting with new language neutral guides that are purely visual to go out with our circulating technology in the hopes of making them immediately accessible to users no matter the language they speak, which and he shared some of them with them, which were really just clever. Our digital inclusion efforts have involved computer classes in Spanish, as well as to one-to-one tech appointments for nearly a decade now. We have definitely discovered that there are far more successful when we partner with community organizations to offer them off-site. So opposing to having people coming into the library, they're going out to the community and meeting with users there or patrons there. We specifically have targeted outreach to day labor organizations, and Spanish-speaking peer groups have offered classes on site. So this organization works a lot with the day laborers, which I thought was very interesting as well. Lastly, they also run a service called the Digital Navigators. They provide one-to-one appointments based on services to the communities, and they help the people apply for affordable connectivity programs or for free or low-cost internet at home. They find free or low-cost devices. They also provide ongoing one-to-one education. So they've taken very much a more one-to-one approach and it goes back to this idea of the social network, providing the community a support of help. If they encounter a problem, they can have somewhere to go and get technology help. So anyway, these are just two stories that demonstrate how the Formistas are working towards addressing the digital divide for the Latinx community. And it truly makes me happy to hear about these efforts. I do think that that digital inclusion is a civil right or basic need right. So this is exciting to see this kind of innovative work happening in libraries across the country. Okay, let me go ahead and just move on to some lessons learned. Like I said, I've been in the library world for over 30 years. I don't know if my lessons have any value to you, but let me just share a few things. First of all, I've learned that and I've said this over, if you haven't gotten this out from anything else from this presentation, your life experience matters in your work. Find your inspiration in your life experiences, who you are, what you're passionate about. That is what's going to keep you going. That's what's going to keep you interested in your work. Don't try to keep them separate. Bring them together, because we all need inspiration. Work is only fun when you are inspired and you're passionate about what you're doing. Second thing, library work is hard. I'm sure you've all hear like, oh, you work in a library, how nice. You must spend your day reading. It must be so calming and so restful. It's, depending on where you work, it's very hard. You deal with some major issues, whether it's mental illness, housing and food insecurities, abuse. You have political challenges like book challenges. You have privacy issues you have to deal with, freedom of speech. I mean, there's a lot of issues that are difficult. And so library work is not easy. And so I always laugh when people think like, oh, it must be so nice to work in a library. It must be so calm. It's like, no, it's not, but we love our work, right? Another lesson is every opportunity is a learning opportunity. And I always tell people this, don't be afraid to take on new responsibilities, even if it's not something you really are passionate about, but you might learn something that can open up another door. And I know that's the case for me. It took me a while. Sometimes I always felt like, well, I'm not qualified, I'm not ready, but more than likely the person who's going to be taking on that role isn't either. So don't be afraid, take on the opportunities, because it is going to make you learn something new that later on you're going to love the fact that you know how to do this and you have that experience. As I said earlier, the library profession is still very much a white profession, so it's important that if you, for BIPOC library workers, to find mentors. And as you can see through my professional journey, I've had the privilege of having some great mentors who I don't know would have become of me if I didn't have them in my life. So look for mentors, whether that means becoming involved in something like Reforma or some of the other National Association's Libraries of Color, which I'll share in a bit. And then the last thing I wanted to say is about, and this kind of circling back to the theme about unity in the information profession. It's important that as you do your work to build bridges, build collaborations. It's difficult at times, but to build these collaborations, but it's important work. It makes you stronger together. So, I would like just to close this is my Reforma family. This is a picture we took at the last ALA conference in DC. And I want to thank you. Just again, encourage you. I guess I have to say, I like to encourage you to join Reforma. If you're not already a member of Reforma, we have many chapters throughout the country. Join on the local level, get involved on the local chapter. If not, we have many national committees. We have something to meet your passions in any way. So considering joining us. If not, please do consider joining any of the other associations, such as the American Indian Library Association, APALA, the Black Caucus of ALA, and China, the CALA, and then JCLC is just another place also to bring us all together. And I think that's it. At this point, I'll stop talking. And if anyone has any questions or anything that they'd like for me to speak on, I'm happy to do that.
Well, Dr. Salinas, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, very informative, and the research that you've done certainly helps all of us to get a better understanding as to what is taking place and what continues to take place. There was one question from Michele Rivas. She posed that in the Q&A. And the question was, do you know where we can see an example of the language neutral guides online?
So the language neutral guides, were from the Denver, right? The Denver Public Library. I'm assuming they might have them post them online. So I would go to the Denver Public Library website and see if it's there. If not, you feel free to email me. I do have a copy of one, and I'm happy to share it with you.
Great, thank you. And I see in our chat, Dr. Villagran from the iSchool also wanted to remind San Jose State students that we do have, and alums, a Reforma chapter within the iSchool that Dr. Villagran is the advisor.
Yeah.
Are there any other? Yeah, are there any other questions, comments for Dr. Salinas? Well, hearing none, once again, thank you for that wonderful presentation, very informative. And once again, a reminder to all of our attendees, the slides and information that Dr. Salinas shared will be available after today's live presentation. All right, so we're going to be moving ahead, and our next section for today's program will consist of two panel discussions. Our first panel discussion will be focused on Hispanic and Latinx experience, culture, and diversity. We have two panelists that will be addressing some questions that I'll be asking them, starting with Mr. David Lopez, also an iSchool alum from San Jose State. And his background, he has an MFA from UC Riverside and his MLIS from San Jose State. And currently he is the marketing and communication librarian with Orange County Public Libraries. And he's also, I believe, an adjunct instructor librarian with Santa Ana College. So welcome, David. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. And the other element I wanted to share, David is also the current vice president of Reforma. Our next guest is Ms. Roma Calatayud-Stocks from Palladian Arts Education. Roma is an award-winning author, composer, and arts cultural consultant. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree in music and psychology from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. So welcome to both of you. And I'm going to start with one initial question that either of you can decide to address. How should we honor Latinx experience, culture, and diversity?
I guess I'll start. I think that it's really important to always acknowledge that as Latinx community members, people, library users, everyone's experience is completely unique. So we should always be sensitive to not lump people into one specific category or another. You know, there are so many intersections within the communities that you have to be sensitive to those types of experiences. So always have that in mind when putting out marketing or planning a program or providing a service, that you may be isolating or excluding specific demographics within that community that you're trying to reach.
Well, I would like to add that I think this is a perfect month, Hispanic Heritage Month, to highlight the contributions of Latinos in culture, in the arts. We have an incredible, rich history, whether it's in music, whether it's in the arts, whether it's in film, whether it's in literature. This is an opportunity for Latinos to stand out more than they do throughout the year, but to stand out with all the contributions that we've done, over the last, not just 20 years of this century, but the last 100 years of the previous century. So this is work that is very close to my heart that I've dedicated a long time to highlighting those contributions.
Great, thank you to both of you. My follow-up question would be, are there specific communities that are doing this well?
Do you want to go, David?
I mean, I think that everyone is doing the absolute best that they can. From BIPOC communities everywhere, they're doing what they feel is necessary for their communities. So I don't have a specific example that I could give, but I think that, across the board, especially in recent history, you've seen activation and people rising to the occasion to make things more inclusive and sensitive to those communities.
I also would like to add that I think we are living in, I would say, in somewhat extraordinary times, in that, just looking at the past 20 years, I have not seen such an opening that there is for diverse voices like we are seeing today. Whether this was after the pandemic, a lot of things have happened around the world, but I do see an incredible opening in culture, in museums, in orchestras, for a diverse voice. And I think that the Latin community, as David mentioned, is very diverse. Yes, we have people from Mexico, and we have people from Cuba, and we have people from Venezuela, in Argentina, and Spain even counts as part of that, obviously, the Hispanic culture. And I think each individual community is doing a great job in kind of highlighting their own individual contributions. Again, whether it's also through Cine Latino, we see a lot of Cine Latino happening around the United States. And Cine Latino, brings in films from every corner of Latin America. So I would say that overall, if we're speaking about Latin community, I think that the Latin community is doing a really good job in in highlighting what we've contributed here in the United States.
Great, thank you, thank you. So my next question, what elements should be present to honor the Latinx communities?
I think, sorry, go ahead, Roma, if you
No,
want.
go ahead, David. It's okay.
I think first and foremost, representation is essential for that, whether it's representation in your library collections, in your programming, in the services that you provide, but most importantly, in the staffing and the professional presence that you have on your staff to ensure that people are connected to the people that they can feel represented by, who they can connect with. You know, growing up, you know, it was because of those few library professionals who spoke the languages that we spoke at home that we were able to get connected to the right resources. So it's really important to make sure that in recruitments, you really emphasize that you're looking for Spanish speakers, people who have experience in cultural programming and services, because that is really where everything will fall into place and, you know, follows.
You know, to add to that, I mean, I really want to encourage students to think about all the possibilities that they're available to them. You know, I think that Latin America, and I think I can say this generally in terms of all the Hispanic and Latinx culture, we have an incredible rich history in the arts, as I've mentioned before. And I think it's important to be part of what's going on in today's world. And so I feel like we can, if we can encourage students to think of themselves as being curators, as being musicians, as being conductors, as being producers, filmmakers. I mean, the opportunities are vast, but we have to think of ourselves that we have the history that we can do it. We have the creativity that we can do it, and that we must also participate. And even if you don't begin as an artist, as David was saying, we need to be part of, to work in museums, to work in orchestras, to work in cultural centers, you know, to work in all these different facets of culture, of the arts. I think then we can share our voices that are part of us, and that we have this amazing history. And as new, you know, I think of, I've had many situations where I've met, in my work that I've met with children of immigrants, and a lot of times they don't know our histories. And so I think it's important for us to, you know, educate or to provide education that offers that kind of background, that kind of history, because it's part of the roots. And I think it's important for everyone, for every student to know, oh, okay, so this is what I'm part of.
Exactly. Well stated. I'm just going to make a comment in the chat. Mario Ascencio, who's going to be an upcoming panelist for us here, provided a great comment. The intersectionality of the Latinx community is also crucial to be included. We are extremely diverse. We can be Latino and gay, Latino and Black, etc. Great comment. And also it adds to the discussion that we're having here. The final element I'd like to ask both of you, share your professional and or personal library experiences that serve the Spanish-speaking community with our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I have one favorite story that I love to share. When I was at my former system, I was supervising a facility that had a computer lab and some programming. And we had a community member who came in to the computer lab who he needed assistance with, you know, getting on. Just kind of ties into Romelia's previous presentation about the access and the connectivity and that one connection that you had. So somebody who, from everything from getting him a Gmail account so that he could first access, you know, what it is to get on Zoom, and then to be able to connect somebody in another country so that he could make a phone call, it took several weeks. When we were finally able to get him connected to a family member in southern Mexico, he physically saw his mother that he hadn't seen in 15 years on camera, and they started speaking Zapoteco, which is, you know, an indigenous language in Mexico. And it was just really beautiful because they were both in tears. And for me as a person who's just doing my job, to experience such a powerful moment that, you know, we could have given that to someone who wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity, it really does help to solidify and make me appreciate the kind of field that this is, right? So that's my favorite story. I love telling that story. It makes me kind of tear up because I think of my own parents. So that's what I wanted to share with you.
Oh my gosh, there's so many stories, but I guess one that kind of encompasses, you know, is, you know, an opportunity that I had to highlight the diverse musical styles of Latin America. And I've been in the Twin Cities for a long time. But I think a lot of people, when they think of Latin American music, you know, they think of mariachis, which I love because it's very much part of Mexico. But we have such a breadth of music. And so I wanted to highlight the diversity of that music. So we had a concert at Orchestra Hall. It's a big music hall in the Twin Cities. And we had about 30 or 40 musicians. And we had music from Peru, and we had tangos from Argentina, and we had waltzes, yes, waltzes, Mexican waltzes from Mexico. And we had bossa nova from Brazil and samba from Brazil. So, I mean, we called it Latin Renaissance. And so that's what I want to end with, since you mentioned that this was the last question, is that is what Latinos are. There is an incredible renaissance in our community, past and present, and going into the future. And so I think, to me, that was the most captivating experience to speak. I wasn't performing, but I could see all the performers be on stage, and all of these people really appreciate the diverse. And this was just in the music. That's not even getting into books or films or painting, but just having that kind of excitement from the larger community about what Latinos contributed to the United States. That, to me, was like a magical moment.
Great. That's fantastic what both of you have been sharing. And I'm just going to pose another element. Any other thoughts that come to mind based on the conversation we've been having that you would like to share with our audience?
I would just add that as a student, believe in your ideas, believe in yourself. No matter what anyone else says, believe in your vision and in your mission, and stay steady with it. And even if you have obstacles along the way, don't worry about that. Just keep steady with your vision, and you will get to it. And believe in yourself and in what you're doing. I guess that's what I would tell students.
Along that same vein, I would say to always, find your cheerleaders, find your support systems, your organizations where you feel represented, where you feel heard, because it's those groups that are going to help you thrive in life. I mean, just like Romelia, Reforma has been a safe haven for me, a place of growth, of development, of where I found mentors in my own professional career who have allowed me to, take those chances that I haven't been afforded in my job, right? So if you don't have those spaces, create those spaces for yourself, be your own cheerleader, and, maybe create a space for people who, like you, are looking for those opportunities or those mentors. So that's the only.
David, I think you muted yourself.
Have I been muted the whole time?
No, the last 2
Okay.
seconds.
That's the only thing. I don't know what happened. That's the only thing that I would share is that I'm so grateful to have had Reforma when I was a student to get myself through those moments.
Great. Thank you. Roma, yes.
I just wanted to also thank you, Dr. José Aguiñaga, and I wanted to also thank Dr. Anthony Chow and thank the San Jose State University for inviting us to be on this panel. I know it's not the end, but I wanted to also thank you.
Well, thanks to both of you for sharing your thoughts, your experiences, and also your encouragement for all of us, whether we are a student or not. We always got to seek those that will be mentoring us and supporting us as we develop and go forward with life, whether in our professional or personal avenues that we pursue. Are there any comments, thoughts from our audience that you would like to ask Roma or David?
Everyone is so shy today.
Well, they're consuming all the wonderful information so far. So,
if I can add just one last thing, because I didn't say anything about writing, and I think that maybe the word being a writer, maybe for some, I think that writing is one of those creative, beautiful things that we are all capable of doing. And so I really want to encourage students to write their ideas, their thoughts, and keep them and save them, because perhaps at one point someone will say, I like to write more about this topic or that topic. And this is one perfect way to express yourself, your thoughts, your ideas, and to share them with the larger community and with the world. So think of yourselves as writers, like I said before, and composers, and anything else you can think of.
Excellent last few words that you're sharing, Roma. I think that's vital. Writing is a great way to get the ball rolling with the thought, the element that you're considering. Once again, thanks to both of you, to Roma and David. And I see that David posted his email address if you want to get in touch with him. Regarding a future follow-up question you may have, whether it's regarding Reforma, where he's at it with Orange County Public Libraries, or just about the profession. Our next panelists, and once again, thanks to David Lopez and to Roma Calatayud-Stocks for attending and sharing their insights with us. As we move forward, our next panelists, let me introduce them. We will be focused on how libraries can better support their communities. And I'll begin with the introductions with Ms. Madeline Peña Feliz, also an iSchool alum, and she's also a past president of Reforma, so very grateful to have her here with us. She currently is the Associate Director for Community Engagement and Outreach at Los Angeles Public Library. And next we have Mr. Mario Ascencio, College Librarian and Managing Director for the library at the ArtCenter College of Design in Pasadena. A little aspect about Mario, he's also a past president of Reforma, and he's a grad from UCLA where he got his MLIS. Currently, he's also serving as chair of the board of directors for the statewide California Electronic Library Consortium, a consortium of private, not-for-profit college libraries interested in licensing online resources. And I believe, Mario, correct me if I'm not stating this correctly, that you're the first Latino to be serving in this role. Congratulations. And then one of my colleagues, Dr. Michele Villagran, assistant professor with the iSchool at San Jose State University. Dr. Villagran is an accomplished educator, innovative speaker, entrepreneur, consultant, cultural intelligence, and diversity and inclusion expert in the public and private sectors. Dr. Villagran's research focuses on diversity and social justice in library and information science and cultural intelligence phenomena within libraries. And last but not least, I'll introduce myself, José Aguiñaga. Also a first semester with the iSchool as a tenure track faculty member. My previous occupation for the past 28 years was as an academic librarian. My research interests focus on the intersection of reference services, organizational culture, and EDI within academic libraries. So here we begin with the infamous questions that will get started with our conversation. And this is to any of you that desire to delve into the first question. What do community members desire from their local library?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be a part of this panel with these colleagues that I admire, some are my mentors and friends, so thank you so much. I think the communities, they want to feel welcomed, they need to feel represented, listened to, and served. Know that the libraries care about their issues, they, and find ways to support their issues and interests. So I'd say that's what the community wants and needs from the library.
Thank you, Madeline.
Buenos días y bienvenidos. Good morning and welcome. Thank you, José, first of all, for inviting us to be a part of this. Happy LatinX Heritage Month to everyone, and to my fellow LGBTQIA familia, happy National Coming Out Day.
Yay!
I also want to acknowledge a few people in the audience. I saw Dolores Carlito, Marisa Alcorta, Susan Muevano, who was the first female president of Reforma, Wanda Cortez, who I believe is in Puerto Rico. So anyways, welcome, all of you. Jose, what was the question again?
Yeah, no problem. I think you've begun to address that question through the chat, through our today's symposium. Question is, what do community members desire from their local library?
Yeah, so what I was going to say, is, Romelia touched on this, is that when we come to libraries, when we come into this profession, a profession that is a service profession, right? Our life experiences matter. I like to say that, that I'm a first generation college student, but I am also a first generation library user. My parents immigrated from El Salvador, and my dad came with a second grade education. My mom came with a seventh grade education. They had no experience or no access to libraries in El Salvador. So this was all new to them. And what librarians need to bring, what library directors need to bring to the game in this day and age is a sense of compassion, empathy, what Romelia said, our life experiences, because it is our life experiences that give us that compassion, that ability to empathize with people. We are in the academic scene, we are dealing with food insecurity, housing insecurity, and we have other issues that impact our students. And so we as service professionals need to be able to bring that human ability. We tend to, or not we, but I think society tends to think or define libraries by their collections, right? Libraries are about collections, but no. Libraries are about people. They're about the people that we serve. We're about the people that build our collections. Yes, collections are important, but it is about that human connection. And the pandemic saw this. We needed to connect with people. We had that yearning to be with people, and the pandemic didn't allow us to do that. And so as for LatinX or for the entire community, I think that compassion, that human element is really important for your students, that are going to be graduating, to come out with that perspective.
And I'll add on, I think this kind of summarizes both what you said, Mario and Madeline. I think today, and particularly in today's climate, it's about the empathetic, the cultural humility and having understanding for people. People make up libraries, people make up organizations. And I think, especially today, that community members are looking for an I don't want to say all inclusive, but a really as inclusive as you can get environment that's safe, friendly, a space, a place, however you want to categorize that as physical or virtual, and even experiences where you can offer interactive learning experiences. It could be through VR, virtual reality, or other opportunities where there's that really unique experience to engage interactively, where you can even share those life experiences and stories. And I think too, with libraries, there's the search for relevant information, but also it's the activity that comes after that. So if it's a student, if it's a public patron, whomever it is, whatever they need, but then it's what they do with that, that relevant information. And that's really integral to our public culture. And I would say that the library is the key to both cultural consumption as well as production, but is probably the only space and or place that is the facilitator of this in our society. So it's bringing together the cultural aspects, cultural consumption, as well as facilitating that, not just through programming, resources, services, but also having that empathetic and human touch. Thank you.
Jose, can I address a question from Janet?
Sure, yeah, please.
So Janet is asking how, that it can be challenging to build relationships or to, ask surveys and there's no replies. And so I think, Janet, I think it depends on where you're reaching out the community. I think iglesias, churches, going where the people are, these are practices that reformistas, reformer members have been doing since like the 70s, early 80s, going to where Latinos go, like, again, churches, supermarkets when they had the pin boards and things like that. Because what you mentioned is that you're doing, the surveys are being conducted at various town-run and library events. But I will tell you, when I was a librarian at the Smithsonian Institution, and I was part-timing at the District of Columbia Public Library. And I would do tours of the library with recent immigrants, mainly from El Salvador. And I would tell them about the great, services that the library had. And they express a concern for coming into the building because it is seen as a government agency. And so there's a reluctancy from especially from more recent immigrants of Latin American countries to engage. And so I could see that surveys being conducted at town-run events may not be the best approach.
I'd like to add to Janet that you need to have staff and people who are conducting also those surveys who are part of that community. That's number one thing. I work for the Los Angeles Public Library. We're in a highly Latino community. Los Angeles is huge. We have many, many communities, but overall, it's a large Latino community. And I can tell we have a position that's called bilingual outreach librarians. So they're bilingual Spanish. And when you look at our statistics, it would say 40% of the interactions are in Spanish. But why? Because we have that position. If we wouldn't have that position, it would be 0%. So the number one thing you need to have is what Mario has been mentioning and Michele is the people reflecting the community. And of course, yes, going to the community, or they're not necessarily coming to the library. You have to go to them, like supermarket, to the park, and also partnering with other community organizations who are already embedded in that community and doing work and service, and they have a trust with them. I think you should go and try to go through them, seek partnerships with those community organizations, community-based organizations who are already in direct contact with the community you're trying to reach.
Excellent feedback. And I think the theme of collaboration, partnership, and going outside of our own community to seek those new partners that will get to know us, and they get to know and pass on that information to the same folks that we all want to serve. The other aspect I would like to ask all of you, how can we honor the contributions of our communities?
So I'll throw this out, even though, well, this is a great example, right? It's Hispanic Heritage Month. So celebrating those stories, you can have programming services, all of that, and highlight those voices and share them during this month, but not just during this month. It should be year round. So celebrating not just ethnic and racial, neurodiversity, all aspects of diversity year round. And I think that's an opportunity to continue these dialogues that we're having. So I'm just going to throw that out as one opportunity or example. And it doesn't have to be, surrounded around a particular celebration month.
I would add also, in addition to the, collections and programming, which is like also the base, the basic that you should do, is providing opportunities for those community members who excel in different areas and they contribute so much to the community to showcase what they do in the library, not necessarily through programming, but maybe providing volunteer opportunities, either in Spanish or with a focus specifically on, serving Latinx for those community members who would like to get involved with the library in a different way.
I think Madeline said this earlier, but people want to see themselves reflected and the things that they do, right? So in libraries, we deal with collections. So obviously collections that reflect the community. And I should mention that libraries are living organisms. So communities change all the time. And so those collections should be changing as those communities change. We're in an academic setting, and as Madeline said, those partnerships are extremely important. So rather than us trying to, us, like I just turned 50, and our students are like in their early 20s, and it's easier for me to partner up with a student association or student organization, let's say the Hispanic art group, and say, hey, like, do you guys want to do a film session together? We'll pay for the screening rights of the movie, and you do the marketing for us. And so those partnerships are extremely important for us in trying to engage with students, because students really, they want to interact with themselves. They're like saying, oh, who's this old person talking to me? They want to engage with the younger people. I'm kind of simplifying it, but it's kind of like, for those of you who've done or have been in a library instruction session, you can tell like the students are learning more, or they're more interested in learning when they're learning from their peers, because their peers are probably doing the same assignments, and it's just a easier way to engage with them.
Yeah, Michele.
Jose, I had one more thought here, because I think whether it's students, whomever your patrons are, or that you're serving, I think another great way to honor them is to not just be a support for them, but given, and we all know the statistics of our profession and how there's a lack of diversity. So this is an opportunity for us to help diversify our workforce and bring in those individuals that may be interested or not know that you can actually become a librarian and what that takes. So I think this speaks to recruitment, and each of us then, in a way, it's like honoring, but also supporting in recruiting for our profession. So it could be writing a letter of recommendation for a student that's applying for a job. It could be being a reference check. It could be a reference. It could be, a patron you regularly see come into the public library, maybe they go on a tour or sharing with, it could be about they went to a program, whatever. But having that conversation with them to share with them, well, you can get a career in librarianship. And here's what it takes. And let me share more with you. And would you be interested? Because I think we as librarians, we need to take this on ourselves to help really transform our culture internally. And also even looking at policies. I know a lot of libraries have recently and more recently updated their policies to ensure that they're, not disproportionately affecting Latinx and other communities, particularly when it comes to EDI. So I think it's another piece too, because it ties into our library system's core values. So I just wanted to add that.
That's a great addition, Michele. And I would have to vouch that having someone that can guide you and talk to you about the possibilities of joining the profession is fabulous. We have many, just based on the students that I've dealt with in the past, many students that have been in library staff positions for a long time, but then eventually they get the opportunity and they apply and they'll become a future librarian, whether it's in the public, academic, or special setting. So here comes another one. What does tomorrow's library provide for the Latinx community?
I love that phrase that we heard many times, that libraries are the great equalizers, right? So like Michele mentioned, that space, either virtual or in person, where you feel welcome, represented, listened to, acknowledged, and where you can have, at least try out, opportunities that you may not have because of you don't have the money for it, you don't have the background to support certain type of education, but you can pursue those independent learning opportunities. You can try new things no matter if you have the money to pay for it or not. Me coming from a public library, that's I see that. So public libraries are so important, because from something like the Octavia Lab that we have at the Los Angeles Public Library, do-it-yourself digital media lab, when people software, it is expensive, like design software. People can come and learn how to use, design software, a 3D printer. They can start even their small business with the equipment that we have. So yes, I think that's something that, Latinx, Latinos, Hispanics, we need to start using our libraries more. Like Mario said, he was a first generation library user. Just take advantage of what the library already offers, and use the library as a resource for equality.
Thank you, Madeline.
If I'm going to go next, I think tomorrow's library provide for Latinx community. I don't know. I think it's going to be some of the same stuff that we've been providing for all these years. Obviously, collections and a sense of being able to connect and engage with community. But when we also think of the intersectionality of Latinos and wages and income and affordability, I was a kid who used the library for the table, right? Meaning that I grew up in a household, in a 2-bedroom house. I shared a room with my brother. There was really it was a small room. There was no space for me to study there. I could study in the kitchen table, but come 3 o'clock, 3:30 or 4, my mom would come home, start dinner. It's not really an environment to do your homework. And so for me, the being able to go to my public library and use a table, which sounds so sad, but I mean, just being able to use a table was really important. But I want to say this, that I've had many people who say, when they go to the library, that's their space where they feel like they can connect. They feel smarter. It's funny that I've seen these videos of like academic libraries that have renovated their spaces, and then they interview the students. And the comment that always comes to mind is like a few students I said, "Oh, I feel smarter, just sitting at the table at the library." So, in K through 12, I would use the library for that. In an academic setting, we have the same thing. We have students who maybe living in a dorm situation, or they have, they live off campus, but they have roommates, and they're not able to study at home. So they also need that space. They need that table to go there. So the basic, I don't know. We still need to provide the basics, I think, and so I think that's something that we just need to continue to do.
I think what all of you have been sharing, and I think Mario just touched on this, it sparked some catalyst in me. The space that is being offered to students, whether it's at a public library or academic library, the renovation of that space has to be taken into consideration. The aesthetics, the welcoming aspect of that space plays a vital role, whether the Latinx community will be using the resource in a more constant pace. So I think the aesthetics, just creating that space of a welcome environment plays a big role too, and encouraging people to continue with their future goals. So now I'm going to delve into another question. How do you see librarians moving forward to positively impact the Latinx community?
I can go first this time. Romelia and I have been talking about this for some time now, and we've talked about HSIs, Hispanic Serving Institutions. And I don't work at an HSI, but I'm very interested in what libraries and HSIs provide for the Latinx community. I believe there's an opportunity here for your students to research this, to write about this. I think we haven't looked hard enough to see where we can make some look at benchmarking, looking at ways that we can really address how HSI institutions serve the Latinx community. I'm really interested in this, and I know Romelia is as well. But of course, we have full-time jobs. And so, I challenge your students to think about that and to write about that, because I think there are ways to learn. And I think there are some institutions that may not be HSIs that may be doing some work in this. José, you mentioned that, I'm on the board of SCELC, the Statewide California Electronic Library Consortium. I'm actually interested in trying to do a project within SCELC to look at our nonprofit private schools to see if there is some benchmarking that we can do and learn from each other on how to serve Latinx students at HSIs or even MSIs, minority serving institutions. So more work to be done.
Absolutely, and a great opportunity to partner and collaborate in those endeavors that you're considering.
I'd like to add that, those librarians who are identified as Latinx, right? You can provide guidance, inspiration, and be role models for those, especially the ones working with youth. And I see many librarians doing that already. And even from different other communities of color, how they're either teen volunteers, or children, they feel inspired from and feel supported by their librarians. So just keep doing that beautiful work. And of course, the basics, programming, collections, but even signage. Many Latinx may be immigrants, Spanish may be their first language, and may feel more comfortable speaking in Spanish language. Just make sure that you have signage and perhaps the staff that would speak the language for them. And referring to something that Romelia mentioned earlier, I think it is important for us to have librarians providing services directly, like LatinX librarians providing services directly to the community, but also they should be also consider higher positions in administration, so they can be at the table and making those decisions that will have, wide impact. And Romelia mentioned, perhaps you don't feel prepared or it's not for you. Well, it could be for you. So just go for also, those positions. I think that's another way that you can impact your community. It's, through that work. And, when it comes to recruitment, and Michele talked to that a little bit earlier, provide those opportunities for members of the community who may be interested in librarianship to learn more. With the Los Angeles Public Library, we have this beautiful program that is called the Diversity and Inclusion Apprenticeship Program, created by Jeanette Brown. And we have continued, and we recruit high school seniors or early college students, and they do like a summer internship paid, and they are like paired with a librarian, and they learn about what the library does. They're given a small budget to create a project and a program. So we've seen many of those students already going to library school. So that's, if you could provide something like that, even if it's not paid, but at least allowing for that opportunity, I think that could be also great.
And I'll add, so I had notes on this, but Madeline, you just sparked one thing I want to mention. This is new, actually. I am a co-PI for a IMLS planning grant called BIPOC Become Librarians. It's a partnership with the San Jose King Library, San Jose Public Library, and then our iSchool. And so we actually are going through, it's a whole one-year grant. We're having mentoring, there's going to be internships to recruit to our profession. And I think if there's more opportunities like that, more organizations and these collaborations that are helping to bring in LatinX and other BIPOC into our profession, that's a door, that's a window. Now, they might not choose our profession, hopefully they will, but they will get that experience. They can share it with their friends. And then I think too, and just from my experience working with our San Jose King Library, San Jose State University King Library, academic librarians have a great opportunity here too, to continue to, I think, foster Latinx student success, whether it's through, again, like internships and things like that, but just having ongoing dialogue and conversations. It doesn't have to be a formal program or something formal. I think it's those informal conversations and those informal even networking or even informal mentoring opportunities. Great to have formal mentors, but if you don't have those informal conversations, and for students, this is where I look to your academic librarians, as well as to faculty and even staff that maybe you identify with. There's a lot of intersectionality. Mario referenced that. So my dream for librarians helping move, positive impact, but also what this future will look like, is that any one of us could walk into any type of library, whether it's called a library or not, research center, whatever, walk in and you see yourself represented. You see your intersectionality shown. It's there. You have that. It might just not be one person, but there will be more than one that you can speak to and have these authentic conversations. And it will be a true, safe, and friendly space, even beyond what it is today. So I think librarians are already starting to do this and have been doing this, but it's just one way. And even with faculty, if you have this within your role, the recruit students to, the profession, and also get involved and encourage them to become involved with organizations like Reforma, and even other organizations. I'm involved with the American Association of Law Libraries, or Latinx Caucus, they just renamed it. CLA has a Latino Services Special Interest Group, and others. And it doesn't have to be library even. I'm involved with the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm involved with the LA Latino Chamber of Commerce. So even other organizations where you might find opportunities, I think all of us as librarians, we can bring along a friend, bring along a buddy, and introduce them to these spaces and places where they can get those informal or even formal mentor or internship opportunities.
Excellent comment, Michele. And I see Mario has his hand up.
Yeah, I want to add to my comments. That's the problem of inviting me, José, to something because I can talk. But
no worries, no worries.
Well, I wanted to highlight something that Dolores Carlito mentioned, and she said, I'm the faculty advisor for the Spanish and Latino Student Association. I'm faculty and I'm eligible to be an advisor. I want to mention this because in about 2005, I think 2004, I was thinking of leaving academic librarianship and going back to public libraries. And I had my mentor, Dr. Camila Lira, was in Washington, D.C., and we had dinner. And I said, I'm thinking about leaving academic librarianship and going back to, and she goes, no, you can't leave. And and I was saying that I was kind of like a little frustrated because I was at George Mason University. It was a big university. And I was trying to, as Dolores was saying, I was trying to figure out how to give back, but there weren't a whole lot of Latinos on campus. So it was I was trying to find my way. And she said, there are other ways for you to get back. You could be the advisor to the Hispanic Student Association on campus. And that's exactly what I did. I was oh yeah, I was well, let me see how I can get involved. And it might seem like a no-brainer, but to me, I was just trying to, I was admin faculty, so I was trying to get, obviously, well, I did get promoted and, my contract renewed and all that stuff, but I was so focused on kind of that career development. And I was thinking, that I was okay, how am I giving back to the Latino community? And that was a great way for me to connect with the Latinx community on campus, to the point that, again, to the intersectionality, to the point where there were so few of us on campus. At the time, I was the head of acquisitions and gifts. So I was basically in technical services. I was not in public services. And I had I'm Salvadorian, as I mentioned. I had a student who his background was Peruvian, and he came out and wanted to talk to someone. His parents were going to kick him out and all that. And he found the one Latino, queer on campus. He found me because, again, I was not public services. I was not doing reference. I was not helping students. I was, managing $5.2 million for the college, but, I was in the back. And the student found me and, and told me, and it's funny because it's, National Coming Out Day, now that I think about it, but it's not funny, but, it just, we're needed. We're needed. And someone had mentioned earlier, we need more Latinx people in the profession. We need more administrators. And it's true because they will find us. And a story like that, it's so powerful. It's I don't know. So just wanted to mention that, yes, there are other ways to give to our community. And sometimes sometimes we need to talk to someone. In my case, I talked to Dr. Alita, and she was, pointing me in the right direction. So think of mentors as well.
Thank you, Mario. Rich story to share. Thank you. I see Madeline.
I wanted to respond to Linda's question in the chat, how important are multilingual resources, if it's valuable? Well, I mean, I'm extremely biased to that because, my work in the Los Angeles Public Library has been a lot to do, it's been a lot related to language access. So with other colleagues that we work together, many of us or all of us are really highly involved with Reforma, with the LA chapter, with Reforma National. We have come together and we formed a language translations team, Spanish language translations team that later became different for other languages as well, to provide, people translations in Spanish of all the vital documents and information that the library is sharing with the community. So it is not only the right thing to do to provide materials and information in the language that many of your community members speak, it's also mandated by laws. And I know this because I'm representing the library with the City of Los Angeles Language Access Working Group, who have explored those different federal laws. If you have any group in your community that's, represent 5% or more of that community, you are mandated to provide resources and information in those languages, or at least provide access by request. So, that's something that you have to look at. It's not just nice or useful, it's you have to do it, and it's only the right thing to do. I'm an immigrant, and I came to the United States already with knowledge of the English language. But a lot of people, they do not speak, English well enough. So, the census information, you can get the data and you can see in your community the percentage of people who, the language that they're speaking in the community, and also what percentage doesn't speak English well enough. So you must provide information in those languages if you can. I know, sometimes the machine generated translations may be better than nothing. I personally don't prefer that. I think it's a matter also of respect. If someone speaks a language and you have resources as a library, as an organization, you need to do your best to serve them, at that level. But I guess, would be better than nothing. But yes, you must incorporate, especially in, Spanish speaking, like Reforma's name, Latinos and the Spanish speaking, you must incorporate collections, programming, and especially information on how to access the library, how to use the library, and what the library is promoting right now in the language your community speaks.
Well stated. Thank you. Thank you, Michele. I do see a question from earlier, about maybe half hour ago or so, and I'll read it back to all of you. Here's a comment. What about people who do not have a library degree and cannot afford it? Libraries need to free the constraints that non-degree library workers have and base it off their experience and their knowledge. Lots of libraries do not let those without an MLIS do any programming or have a say in collections, even though staff could still have the knowledge of what the library needs. Can you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so we are at ArtCenter College of Design. We do have staff members who may not have an MLIS degree, but so ArtCenter is a design school, so we teach things like game design, things like that. We have a very small film department, but so we have employees who are gamers and have even write for I don't know if you call them gaming magazines, and so we are curating a collection of games, and so we have them help with the curation of that because they're the best ones to do that. Also with books, we have them help we do have an official liaison librarian with a degree who's the liaison to the department. But we do have them help with that sort of work. So it's stuff that taps into their interests. It makes them feel, like they're using their expertise. And so, yeah, so that's something that we need to I think libraries need to do a better job at this. We're still not perfect, I want to say, at ArtCenter. There's a lot of politics as well as to, for example, it's in someone's job, right? And someone got hired to be the liaison to the film department. And if you have someone who wants to take on that, then it's the politics of saying, well, hey, can we take this away from you? And so it's a little bit harder than it sounds like, but yeah. So, but we can start small. And so when there's a new opportunity like the gaming thing that we're doing, it's fresh. It's something that we can start from scratch. So.
Thank you, Mario. I see that we do have a question in our Q&A section, and I'm going to read it out. I am a current white SJSU iSchool MLIS student. I grew up in BIPOC communities and consider myself a member of the disability and LGBTQ plus communities. I am also a first-gen student and am interested in first-gen, first-year experience and outreach librarian positions. I don't speak Spanish, but I have an interest in HSIs. How do I better prepare myself to serve these populations when I still reflect the dominant group in librarianship? Any thoughts?
I just want to say, for example, Reforma as an organization, we embrace and welcome everyone who has an interest in serving Latinos and Spanish speaking, right? So, you are welcome if you that interest and that passion. You know what I was talking earlier, responding to the question, Dr. Aguiñaga, of how can librarians better serve Latinx communities? I forgot to mention that, those, Latino librarians, yes, do this, but those who are not Latinx, who are working with those communities, just learn more about the community, the cultural, the differences, and what their interests are, just learning more about the community, and being in touch with the community and making sure they feel, welcome, and served, listened to. I mean, I think you can do, you can more than welcome to be in that role.
If I can add to that, yes, definitely. I think definitely. Well, first of all, thank you for your interest in the HSI community. That's really important. That's really great to hear. I think what Madeline said is right on the money. Like, I think getting involved in Reforma now as a student, where it's going to cost you very little, or maybe it's free, I think, for students. But getting involved with Reforma to work with like-minded librarians on this. We have Reforma, as Madeline says, is very diverse. We have, I am the third Salvadoran president. Madeline is the second Dominican president.
There's been three of us with Kenny, Isabel, and I.
Okay, great. And so we have white librarians who have been crucial to our work and have made great contributions. And so we need help, and we need allies, and we need people like you to get involved with Reforma to help us address this. So one of my dreams is that, maybe Reforma could take a leadership in, helping to address the HSI question, like what can academic libraries do in HSIs? What can we do differently, and have it be like a learning model for other institutions? So I welcome you to join Reforma, and actually I welcome you to reach out to me and continue this conversation as well. And we can brainstorm on how to address this.
Michele.
Well, I think Madeline and Mario, you summarized what I was thinking. But for this individual, please reach out to me. I'm happy to speak with you. And join our student alumni group. While you're in school, it's a great opportunity to learn more about Reforma. You'll join Reforma National, as well as if there's a chapter by you. But we need all diverse walks of life. You don't need to speak Spanish. I love the fact that you share with us your identities and the intersectionality, because that's really important. And I think highlighting now just how crucial it is that we're not just one identity. There are multiple identities. And even within the Spanish-speaking community, there are a lot of variations, we'll say, or unique identities. So I appreciate that. And I think we need, as allies, we need those that you can learn more, and even maybe it's with mentoring or some informal conversations to have just about and meeting with librarians that are doing this type of work. I'd be happy to introduce you to some of our the colleagues that I'm working with at the King Library if you're interested around the BIPOC Become Librarians project. So please reach out. But I think there's a lot of work that we need to do in this area, and you don't need to identify as Latinx, Latino, Latina, Hispanic to be a part of Reforma. We welcome everyone and really value and appreciate all of the uniqueness that you can bring to the table.
Well stated, and the doors are always open for everyone to assist and develop and grow what Reforma has been doing. I just wanted to share one little aspect, hearing these wonderful conversations. When I was in library school, the first library association that I joined was Reforma as a student. And it's been an ongoing, nurturing, insightful organization in my own development as a person, but also as a professional. Now, we're getting to almost to the end of what we've been going through today. It's been a wonderful experience, great dialogue, great discussion. Are there any other comments, questions that some of you may have?
Jose, there's one more question that popped up from Claudia in the Q&A.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Alfredo. So Claudia is asking, I've been working many years in public library in circulation and now changing my career to librarian. Congratulations. I am nervous starting my career, this career later in life. I am now facing what librarian pathway to go to. I want to change from working in public libraries and go to the academics library setting. Something in me says to stay in the public side because of my language skills. It's a dilemma for me now that I'm back in school. Any advice?
Yeah, so for Claudia, thank you for your question. So one thing about academic libraries is that sometimes you have to be willing to move for academic jobs. And so this is a reality that you have to think about. And so you may or may not be able or willing to move. So that's just a reality that you have to think about. As far as, I don't know, they're both rewarding. I mean, but yeah, it's a decision you have to make.
Madeline.
Also, you're going to school, just maybe keep your options open. Take as many diverse classes that you can take, At the end of the day, when you finish your degree and you are looking for a job, then that's pretty much when you're going to make a decision, because it all depends of, if you need to get a job right away or if you can wait, then, if you can wait, so all about timing, you can then go with whatever you want to do. But if you would like to get a job as a professional librarian as soon as possible, you may need to be flexible. Right. Also, community colleges, I think that's a happy medium there. I worked as an adjunct with Long Beach City College, and it was so rewarding. You have no idea. It brings, so how happy some of the students were to come to me, being able to speak to me in Spanish. So now that you say that the language skills, I don't think they pay bilingual bonus. I don't know, but I didn't get paid for that, but I just loved it so much. So that's something that you could consider as well, community colleges.
Michele.
And I just wanted to add that Claudia, you remind me of myself, because many of you probably don't know this, but I started in public libraries. I worked 10 years for Las Vegas, Clark County, and I went into law librarianship. I was, scared and afraid, and went into the legal profession. And what I did was I did a lot of networking. I joined like the law library chapter and regional groups like SWAL and SCAL, so Southwest and Southern California, and I consider myself a baby. I was in school working at a public library as a reference assistant, I think it was 9 years in, and I was starting to job hunt, and I wanted to switch to law libraries. And I just started going to these events and speaking with law librarians, like, what is it like? Tell me more. And a lot of them eased my fear and my concern. And also, I started to think this isn't a barrier, this is an opportunity. So I would really encourage you to speak with academic librarians. We have Mario here. Jose formerly was in a community college. Surround yourself and speak with those academic librarians to really learn like the environments. And specifically, if you know an area or region you might want to relocate, kind of target those organizations and then connect, reach out. You may not know them, just send a quick hi, and you'd be surprised. Librarians will respond and give you time to help you in your career and to really kind of guide you, even if you don't know them. And that's what I did. And I have tons of friends that I met randomly that I still run into. So that would be my advice towards this question. And take opportunities while you're in school. Right now, I mean, join the student groups, join as a student through your associations, and really do some of that networking. And even if you have a friend, be their buddy. Say, can I go along with you? I went to my first ALA. I was the only library assistant in my district that went, and I roomed with a librarian, and she took me around everywhere. And it was very eye-opening. And that was in the 90s. So I would also say, do that if you can, or if you can, find that individual to kind of support you and lead the way for you.
Great. Thank you, Michele. I believe we have one more question, and we'll be running up close to the hour here to wrap.
I can answer that, Jose, if you want me to. The biology.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Nerida, you would be really wanted in many academic settings. I will tell you that having served on, many search committees, biology librarians or the science librarians are in much need, but also we don't get a lot of applications for that. So for example, like an art librarian, or an English librarian, humanities librarian, when we post those jobs, we get over 100 applications. For the sciences, we get 10, 15. I don't know if it's changed, but it still means that you have to do a good job with the cover letter and cover letters, and your CV is really important in the academic setting. But also, you can also think about the museum setting. So, for example, the National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. When I was a librarian there, we had librarians with your background. So, very exciting type of institutions. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to combine your interest in biology and your interest in library science. It'd be a great combination, and you would be, welcomed.
Mario, thank you so much for that reply, and it's so true. Having that science background is quite valuable, and there are many opportunities, not just in the public or academic setting, but also in special libraries. So well stated. What I've just done, I've added into the chat 2 links. And first off, I want to thank you again for joining us today. What's listed is our research center for the Hispanic Latino community, and also the new EDI YouTube channel for the School of Information. And after today, the recording and full transcript will be available a few weeks from today. It is truly an honor to host today's event, and special thanks to Dr. Salinas with her keynote address, and all of our wonderful panelists for their time, commitment, and sharing their stories and experiences with us. Our next symposium will be next month in November for Native American History Month. Date and time will be announced very soon. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. Take care.